Looking for a guaranteed way to create content that resonates with your audience? Start a podcast. Interview your ideal clients and let them choose the topic of the interview. Because if your ideal clients care about the topic, there's a good chance the rest of your audience will care about it too. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to the B2B Growth Show, a podcast dedicated to helping B2B executives achieve explosive growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. I'm Jonathan Green.
And I'm James Carberry.
Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. We are here today with Pete Sena. He is the CEO and Chief Creative Officer at Digital Surgeons. Pete, how are you doing today?
Been awesome. Thanks for having me.
I am excited to chat with you today, Pete. We're going to be talking about actually a talk that you have given at Yale. You've given it at several companies, and it's around this idea of, the one thing that will change the way you think. And in essence, we're going to be talking about design thinking. I know I've heard a lot of people talking about design thinking, Pete, but I don't know that I fully have my head around it. So this is actually going to be a really helpful conversation for me as well. And I think our listeners are going to take away a ton from it. But before we dive into that, Pete, I'd love for you to just explain to listeners, give them a little bit of context about what you do at Digital Surgeons and how you guys are helping folks.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, one of the things I always like to share with folks that aren't as aware of Digital Surgeons is just a little bit about my background. So I'm a designer developer by trade. So, kind of cut my teeth, really helping to put together marketing programs. I've worked across a number of different industries, B2B, B2C. I've worked at, with product companies, et cetera. And what ultimately I decided to go on and start back in 2004, 2005 was a digital agency, which at the time was a very, very avant-garde thing, but now obviously has been, really completely commoditized. And, one of the things over the past decade that I've learned as we've shaped our position, the Digital Surgeons now, today, we're a design and innovation agency, and we really specialize in one thing, which is we help companies explore and invent new ways for them to reach and connect with their audiences. And we typically do that across new and emerging digital channels. So we often, I know a lot of the groups on the call here are, at a management or director or executive level, typically in B2B organizations. And we work with a lot of B2B companies to really help them innovate and to help them think about their current processes and their current, what we like to call digital literacy, and how they're using digital, whether it be through data or experiences or products, to really create a better experience, a better connected experience for their end audiences. So to your point, one of the things that we've done a lot of talks and workshops around is this idea of what's the one thing that can change the way that you think and operate, and it's design. And, design for a very long time, again, not knowing how much background some of the folks on the call have, design for a long time was really something that, it was what creative people did. It was it was pretty colors and fonts and making things look good. So it was graphic arts and that sort of thing. And I think, what's started to happen now in the C-suite is people are really realizing that taking that human-centered, that sort of customer-centric approach to how you design your products, your services, and your experiences, that is creating a transformational shift in companies. It's one of the reasons we see, entirely new business models happening. It's why companies like Unilever went and bought Dollar Shave Club. If you can't beat them, buy them, right? So we're seeing a really interesting thing in the market right now with changing the way people think about product development, changing the way people think about marketing. And what it really comes down to is this thing that has been around for 20, 30 years, which is just design thinking.
So when you're stepping into an organization and you're explaining this idea of design thinking, as we were talking offline about, just about kind of how you structure the talk, you start it by having them think about a new product that can benefit, real people. And then once they're in that kind of frame of mind, talk to us about kind of how you then kind of guide the audience so that they really get an understanding of how design thinking can impact how they're going to market with the product or service that they're bringing. Absolutely.
So I think, in the case of many of the folks on the call and the listeners here, you might be used to siloed or matrixed organizations in which, a functional department group is responsible for one thing, whether it be engineering or customer service or logistics. or operations. And oftentimes these groups, there's a very streamlined stage gate process, which by design, creates a sort of kind of one horizontal stage gate for how people operate and connect to each other. So I think when we talk about design thinking, to your point, one of the first things we introduce is the element of play and the element of exploration, which, as many of the execs listening on the call know, is the millennial workforce today is looking to be engaged in a very, very different way, right? They don't want to be sitting in, a cubicle, sitting around the same sort of, fixed meetings where sort of PowerPoints do the talking. They want to be much more collaborative in the way that they're engaged. They want that constant feedback loop, and they want to be really involved in a much more hands-on way. So what we typically do when we do that exercise is we just play a game where we're helping to create some prompts. And in those prompts, we ask people to sort of basically take an arbitrary list of apps, an arbitrary list of objects, and then audiences, and then combine them together and to make something interesting. So, for example, one of the things on the list might be YouTube. Another one on the list might be an object like a tablet, and then another list will come from something like audiences. So, YouTube, tablet, and busy parents. How do you combine those three things together to create something entirely new inside your business? So, for the B2B tech companies here, maybe you have a large amount of new parents in the workforce, and you're looking to create a tablet-based application that deploys videos on YouTube on how they can be an executive and a parent and specialize in work-life balance. Now, typically that would fall under a human resources purview, but as an executive, understanding that now as your workforce is growing up and having children, becoming first-time parents, or having kids that are growing up, needing to create a product or a service internally that can both service your teams internally, but then also be something that potentially can go onto your audience. So that's a good example of how literally in just 30 seconds, just from combining things from different columns, if we start playing and introducing this idea of sort of gaming into the workplace, now all of a sudden you can get creativity from everywhere. So when I talk about design thinking, there's a lot of lore around design thinking. There's a lot of buzzwords. All the major corporations now are behind it. IBM just launched a global initiative on design. We have large companies coming into the space now, like Envision, which started out as just a UX prototyping software, and now it's taking over large Fortune 500 companies in terms of how they operate. But design thinking is just about bringing back critical thinking. It's about bringing back problem solving. And I hate to say it, but I don't want to sort of take the mask off here, but the reality is all design thinking is it's a process for solving problems through observation and iteration. It's pretty much the scientific method. And some of the greatest things that came out of processes like Six Sigma and that sort of thing, it's being able to take all the best thinking, put it together, and then have that sort of test and learn approach. So it's how big companies can really think and operate in a lean way like a startup, but still be able to leverage all the infrastructure and all the formal processes that they already have in place that have gotten them to the level that they're at today.
Could you maybe share an example of a product or a new service that a company introduced that came as a result of design thinking, and kind of walk through how it came to be?
Absolutely. So one of the clients that we are working with is a global utility, and they're located in a number of different countries. But one of the things that we helped them with was by doing an innovation summit with them, we were able to teach their sort of line level managers how to do something called a 5-act interview. And basically what we did is we taught them how to use design thinking to interview, to ask open-ended questions. And what we helped them to do was we basically helped them save a few $1 million on an initiative that they were going to be executing. And we helped them really understand exactly the needs that their teams had. And what we basically did was we talked to a number of different user groups. One of them was customer service. And what we helped enable the managers to do that were working on this digital transformation initiative is we helped enable the managers to talk to their customer service people to understand the biggest pain points and the biggest points of friction that the customer service agents were having, that then their customers were having. So by being able to unify the problems using design thinking, by being able to give them the tools on how they could collect this information, distill it in a uniform way, what we were able to help them realize is that the problem that they thought they had was actually very different from the problem they really had. So then instead of launching a large initiative, which was estimated to take about 2 or 3 years when they were working with some of the larger consultancies, that was a really good long-term plan, but we helped them implement some very small iterative solutions, which largely help them with improving customer satisfaction. So metrics like Net Promoter Score, helping to drive up Net Promoter Score, which still works pretty well here in the States. It's not as useful, I think, globally, but helped to drive up Net Promoter Score, which was improving customer experience, and then also helping to improve employee satisfaction, which largely is going to long-term contribute to both morale and reduce attrition. So what we were able to do is look at an entirely different set of metrics because we asked an entirely different set of questions. And that's a really good example of how you can launch a product or a service improvement internally using this line of thinking. So that's one example that I would give that has now relaunched an entirely new series of initiatives. And that one project was so successful that now we've been asked actually to, next month we're going over to Europe to train and do some of these programs in their European office, just based on some of the success that it's had here domestically.
That makes perfect sense. Pete, if there's somebody listening to this, they want to stay connected with you, they want to learn more about digital surgeons, what's the best way for them to go about doing that?
I would say I'm pretty active on Twitter. My Twitter handle is at Pete Sena, Petesena. Would love to hear any questions or feedback from you guys, good or bad. Really, really honored to be on the show with you here today, and would love to come back if I could offer some value to those listening. You can also be reached on our website, digitalsurgeons.com. But really, I'd say the thing I'm most interested in is just, how has this information today been helpful or not helpful so that I can continue to really help inspire people to think differently and to connect with their customers and their employees in a different way.
I love it. Pete, thank you so much for your time today, man. This has been really helpful for me, and I think our listeners are going to get a ton of value out of it as well. So I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks again for having me. I really appreciate it.
If you've been getting value from this podcast, you can help us reach more people by reviewing the show on iTunes. Here's how you can leave a review in less than a minute. Open your podcast app and tap the search icon in the bottom right corner. Type in B2B Growth, then select our show. Once you're there, tap the Reviews tab and tell us what you think of the show. These reviews help us out a ton.
Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.